Hi, Danville. Alan Shields here, Chief of Police for the town, and we are 10-8 and in service to all of you, which means we're here to safeguard the lives, rights, and property of the people we serve, and we do that in an effort to make people's lives better. On the show, we're going to talk about the robbery that had occurred yesterday. We're going to talk about the information release policy and the information that we do push out and why we push it out. And then I'm going to cover some of the information. If you missed it, last night was our town council meeting, and I gave a quarterly update, and I pulled some items out of that quarterly update to provide all of you tonight. And we'll also cover the crime blotter and some ways that you can reach out and help here in town. But first off, if you're interested in making the roadway safer, we have a great opportunity through our local roadway safety plan. I would encourage you to click the link down in the description. And this is where you can provide your input as to what you think we should do better to improve the roads in town. You can either define a specific point or an area. You can draw like a whole polygon over Communitas Era and say, speeding is crazy. Is there anything we can do from a traffic calming method to change that? So that's a good way there. And one way that you can engage with us, it's coming up. And I tell you what, I think that this is a really fun event. It spreads us a little thin because we have to hit so many places. And I'll say throughout the county, Danville tends to have more communities than most that come together. And that's for National Night Out. August 2nd of 2022 is National Night Out. And that's an opportunity for you to get together with your neighbors. And I'll tell you what, if you throw out some barbecue or some food, that tends to draw the biggest crowds. And it's just a great way, especially after we've maybe had some turnover in the neighborhoods, to allow each one of us to meet our neighbors and be neighborly. And then what we will do is we'll come out from the police department, and we also bring our elected officials. So you'll see the mayor, vice mayor, and some council members out there. And it's a good opportunity to just let us know what it is that we can do from a town, from a police department, to better serve all of you. And it's a great time. So I do enjoy it. I think we should probably do National Night Out on a monthly basis, but no one seems to be buying into that. But any chance to get together and break bread, so to speak, I think is going to be a good opportunity. Let's move on to the blotter, communitycrimemap.com. As always, you can get your information up to date directly from communitycrimemap.com. We upload direct to the site several times a day. You can also set up an alert that'll go straight to your email, and you can also get sex registrant information direct from that site. So this is last week, so this does not include yesterday, and this is our part one crime. That's the crimes that you see off to the right. We had one theft for the entire week, and that was a theft of an employee's wallet at Costco. And I can't tell you how amazing that is right there. If you think about it, one theft for a week, that's 52. If you smooth it out over the year, that's incredibly low. Last year, we were just over 200 part one crimes. We usually float in the high 200s to low 300s if you look at the last 5 to 10 years. So that is an incredibly low number. That means that's not a reflection of the police department. That's actually a reflection of all of you. During these shows, we give crime safety tips, and we say, take your wallets and purses and backpacks and take them with you. Don't leave them inside in your cars. Lock them up. Don't give a motivated offender anything to look at, to take. And I tell you what, when I see that there's only been one theft for a week, that is a huge kudos to all of you, because with 45,000 people in town, that is reflective of all of you doing just an excellent job. So great job to all of you. Now let's move on to driving, because you're not going to get any kudos from me on your driving this week. Driving was very poor this week. We had a total of 7 collisions, 7 reported. So these are the ones where we actually send an officer out and they write a report. On June 13th, we had non-injury collisions at the Monte Vista High School in the 1800 block of Diablo Road. And if you're looking at the map, the non-injury collisions are green. The injury are the amber color. So on June 14th, we had an injury collision on the Iron Horse Trail at Delamiga Road. And I believe that was between a cyclist and a car. On June 14th, we also had a non-injury collision on El Cerro Road and Diablo Road. On June 16th, the property injury collision on the 400 block of Front Street. And then on the 16th, we had a collision on Sycamore Valley Road and Camino Ramon. So that is a lot of accidents. We have been ratcheting up our enforcement. Let me put it back up. As you can see from the map, the injury collisions, so those are the more severe ones, are occurring in that downtown corridor. And that's where we've been focusing a lot of our enforcement activity, as well as that Communitas corridor. And let's look at the map again. Like in this particular week, there were no accidents on Communitas. That doesn't mean that we stop enforcement on Communitas. We know, because we hear it from all of you, that people are still speeding on Communitas Sahara. In fact, there was an email that came into the mayor. And this is a good example of how communication works in town and how everyone here is working to serve all of you. A resident called in and she had said that that she was concerned over the accidents on Communitas Sahara, that she had almost got hit, her husband had almost got hit, and that people are speeding and they'll run stoplights and make a right turn without stopping at the stoplight. So she provided some really good feedback directly to the mayor. The mayor throws it right to me. I've replied in an email looking for her phone number so I could talk to her, because I'd like to talk to her in person. But we realize that the report of bad driving from all of you is predictive of potential future accidents later. And that is why we go out and we enforce. We don't just enforce where the collisions are. We do follow the data because we know that's important, but we know that each one of you is an expert in your neighborhood, and it's very important for us to listen to you and drive enforcement there. And if we notice pattern behavior, if we have something where we feel there might be an engineering solution, we go up the hallway to our partner, Andy Dillard, and we work with him. And I'll give you a good example of that. On Diablo Road during the school year, we were running into a problem where, because of the backup, people were riding in the left turn lane further than allowed. And what they were doing was they were essentially riding in the left turn lane where you can turn left from either east or west, but they would continue straight into where it became a left turn lane for one direction only. And what that means is they were essentially driving in the turn lane and then continuing to drive the wrong way on the road. And so our traffic officer was out there writing tickets, and he came in, he said, hey, we need to do something different. So he spoke with our partner, Andy Dillard, and they're going to work on an engineering solution with paint and maybe even some sticks in the middle of the road. But they're going to work on a structure that will hope to curb that problem and make it safer out there. So we do work hard on our end to reduce these collisions. And I would say that we would ask all of you to do the same and work on the driving. So we appreciate all of that. All right, so let's talk about the robbery, and I'll give you what information we are putting out. This doesn't mean this is all we know. I mean, I hope that all of you know that we are working diligently and hard, and we're doing that on behalf of the victims so that we can bring the people that did this to justice. And I would ask, and I'm going to explain it a little bit later in the podcast here, but this is the information that we feel it's appropriate to release right now so that we don't harm the investigation. So let's take a look at what happened. So there was a robbery on Hartford Road. We got a call at 5:45 p.m. that there was a robbery on the 200 block of Hartford Road. While officers were responding, we issued a nixle asking people to avoid the area. And we had several suspects that used handguns and robbed 4 of our residents that had just parked their vehicle. There was an exchange of gunfire between the suspects and a neighbor who witnessed the robbery. The suspects ended up fleeing in their vehicles. And then we haven't had any reported injuries as a result of the gunfire. Our Danville police officers and our sheriff, our Contra Costa County Sheriff's Crime Lab, went out and investigated that scene. And then the suspects are still outstanding, and I can guarantee the investigation is still ongoing. Now, let me break from this and just generally talk about how a major investigation goes. I know last week we talked about how a major collision investigation goes. This week, it follows a similar pattern. There's going to be the initial investigation that happens on scene. That's where we go and we try to identify all of the evidence, witnesses, everything that we possibly can, because you only have one opportunity to get that portion of it right. And so we spend a lot of time. And during that time, I even responded out there. I was on scene with the supervisor, and we worked through with the Danville officers that were there. We had a lot of support from the sheriff's deputies that were out of our Alamo substation. So there were a lot of cops there doing a lot of things to try to work to solve what happened. As these large-scale events go on, you've got that initial part, and then you have your attempt to apprehend and your analysis. And that's the part we're in now, and that does take time. And so this is where I ask for a little bit of grace from all of you. We would love to open our books and be transparent with every single thing we can, but it is really, really important to protect the investigation and to make sure that we can do the best job that we can for our victims, that we do hold things back, and that we make sure that we We provide information so you understand that there is a significant event that occurred here in town and that your police department is working on behalf of the victims to keep this town safe. So that is our commitment to you. And what we ask in return is for a little bit of grace and a little bit of time so that our investigators can work this case. All right. So I'm going to go to the chat real quick. This is a live show. So if you have a question and if it's something I can answer, I'll answer it. If it's something I can't, I'll tell you why I can't. And if it's something that I can't because I just don't know the answer, I'll look it up after the show and I'll type it into the chat. So stay tuned there. So bear with me a little bit while I scroll through this chat here. Yuri says driving on Camino Taos is the worst. I wouldn't say it's the worst. I've driven in other areas, but certainly there is an issue there. Remember, Camino Taos area is designed to move cars in a very efficient manner, and it does what it is intended to do. I remember about 6 or 7 years ago, I used to get complaints from people that lived out in the Blackhawk end of town that took them too long to get to the freeway because of all the stoplights. And could I make all the lights green longer? And so we do get it from both ends, but safety is the number one priority. And that's what we do when we think of design and enforcement, is we work to keep people safe. All right, Kimberly says, does Danville PD monitor east of Diablo Vista Middle School, or would that be the Contra Costa Sheriff? So good question. Here's the way we look at it. And you can go to Danville Pioneer, and you can actually look up the Danville town boundary. From a calls for service perspective, so in other words, if someone steals your wallet and you're standing in a specific geographic location when it happens, we're going to try to determine who has responsibility from a jurisdiction standpoint to manage that. When it comes to traffic enforcement, we view it a little bit different. And you do have overlapping jurisdictions. We've got Danville Police Department in that area. We've got Danville Police Department. We've got the sheriff, Contra Costa Sheriff, and we have California Highway Patrol. Our good friend, Captain Chris Sherry over at the Dublin office is actually responsible for that. And I know that he puts folks out there quite a bit. Here's the way we view it with traffic enforcement. The person that's speeding on Camino Taos Sahara and travels from the Danville area to the Contra Costa and CHP area, they're traveling in a region or a zone. And so we feel that it is important for all of us to work together in law enforcement to enforce that corridor. And so we will enforce that area. We realize that there's overlapping. There isn't a steady line that I say, do not cross this line, officers. That's CHP. We work together with them. So as we receive complaints, or if there's information that comes in from the CHP side or the Danville side, we share that with one another. And then oftentimes you can see us, well, let me not say often as though it happens weekly, but when we notice a problem pop up, we will team up with CHP to do directed enforcement in the area, where all along, as an example, all along Camino Taos area, you'll see Danville cops and CHP. Sometimes we'll even ask Lafayette and Orinda to help out. And we do the same for them. If they would like to do direct enforcement, we'll supply them with cops. It's part of mutual aid. Frankly, it's just part of being good neighbors in law enforcement. We'll have additional officers in there to help out. So if the accident happens, we're going to determine who actually is responsible for investigating it. But when it comes to slowing traffic down in that region, we really do try to work together to solve that problem. All right. So good question. Okay. Sorry, it's jumping around on me a little bit. So Julie says, was it a random robbery, or do you suspect they knew the victim? So what Julie's asking is, she's asking a question of motive as to the robbery that occurred yesterday. And frankly, that's not information that we release right now. And I'll get into a little bit of that when we go on to the next segment, where I talk about information release to citizens and kind of what we do from our standpoint when we look at why we're releasing information and what information we need to release. Gary says, do we have ample officers working traffic on Camino Taos during weekends and PM hours? Well, ample is a tricky word. I will say this, that your town council and your town manager have done very well with the finances for the town of Danville, that even when the economy has turned down over the last 20 years, Danville has not suffered. They have managed the money very well. So that never becomes a factor in how and what we try to do for enforcement. In fact, we've even added positions over that time. So kudos to all of you, and kudos to our town council for making sure that they keep that safety the priority here in town. When it comes to ample officers on Camino Taos, I would say we do. If we didn't, we would alter our strategy. And this is one of the things that I really like, frankly, as being a manager. And I realize we have a bunch of viewers here, but if you don't know, I'm a lieutenant with the sheriff's office assigned to the town of Danville, and I'm afforded a great deal of autonomy and flexibility when it comes to working the problems here in town. A good example, and I'll use COVID as an example, as our calls for service and our need for officers in very specific areas went down, I was able to not backfill positions that if it was a normal time, I would. And the example I give is our schools. Schools weren't going in person, so I didn't need an officer in a school. If they would have showed up, there would have been no one there, right? So I was able to really quickly adjust and work that. And so what we say on the other side is how do we plus up and add is we have a traffic unit that consists of 3 officers and a supervisor. And what we do is we do analysis on collisions, on traffic complaints. And what we do is we essentially say, and we've adjusted over the years on the days of the week and the hours within the day that our traffic officers work. And what we do is we want them to work when the accidents are happening and when the complaints for speeding are coming in. So to address your specific question, at night on Camino tasks and in that area on the PM and the weekend hours, what we do is, because it's spot checking and it's not as consistent as some of our other areas downtown where we know we're getting a lot of collisions, we will fill those with overtime. And so we'll put spot hours up throughout the week where officers can sign up, work overtime, and do direct enforcement in those areas. And so instead of filling a whole shift for 8, 10, or 12 hours in the middle of the night, I can say I have a problem area of 3 hours or 4 hours where we know this is occurring, and we can spot fill that. And it's a very, frankly, financially frugal, but very effective way at putting an officer right where we want him when we need him. So that's how we handle that problem. Okay. Random. Okay, so Joanne says, hope you had a great run today. Your shirt gave you away. It sure did. So for those that don't know, we did the Special Olympics torch run today. That torch has been going all through Contra Costa all day today. Started up in Martinez, ended down in San Ramon today. And I tell you what, we had that afternoon run and it was hot. So your officers from the Danville Police Department and the Sheriff's Office took that torch and carried it down from Walnut Creek to San Ramon. And I'll have to admit, we did drive a little bit. We drove it to Danville PD, and we made the run from Danville Police Department down to San Ramon. So we were happy to do it, and we thanks to everyone that donated. I know we had a couple of donation events. We raised a good amount of money, and it goes right to the Special Olympics athletes and their ability to perform in the games and also get well check appointments. So I do appreciate that. Okay, so we've got another question here. It keeps clicking on me. Is there, and this is from Robin Dixon, is there anything being done to the Green Valley Diablo Road area with all the new homes being constructed? And so, Robin, I'm going to give you a good example of what a punt looks like. And I'm going to punt this question, but I am going to get you the answer. But it seems like this question in particular, I know, has a somewhat of a complex answer. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to give you one off the cuff. I'm going to go up to our transportation partners and I'm going to get you the answer, because I know that there are actually a lot of things going on in that area, and I want to make sure that I give you the good information. So I will circle back and I will answer your question, but I'm gonna punt. I think this is too far of a field goal for me to kick right now. Todd is talking about hearing some of the shots from yesterday, thinking they were construction. Okay, and so, and Todd is given some feedback, and I appreciate the feedback. He's saying that it is important for us as the police to provide as much information as early as possible to avoid people not knowing what's actually going on. And Todd, here's what I'll say to that, and I'll actually cover it a little bit later too. We want to make sure that we give the appropriate information out, but we do want to be accurate in the information we're giving out. If you remember yesterday, I'll use this as an example, and only because it's been publicized on social media, so I'm not releasing information that hasn't already been released, but there was a lot of social media posts that were saying it was a carjacking and it was this and that. and it did turn out to be a robbery, but it was something different than was initially reported. So as we're trying to find out information, we just want to make sure that all of you know, hey, there's police activity in this area, avoid the area. Like that is our number one concern. If it were a hillside and there was a hazard, a fire, something like that, we would want to immediately identify the area and say evacuate. So we're going to get that out. As we can get more information out that is relevant, we would put that out. So I do appreciate that. It's good feedback. And what I'll do is I'll get with Nicola Shihab. She's our public information officer, and I'll look to see if we can't tweak some of our language to make it a little more understanding. And I appreciate you putting such a big detail of information there, because I think that'll help us to better refine how we communicate. So Todd, I do appreciate that feedback. All right, looks like we're on to the next segment. Hey, we're going to talk about information released to citizens. And this is a general policy within the Sheriff's Office, and it talks about how we release information to the citizens. Generally, it's covered by the government code. So many of the things that we do are already legislated, and we do it as a way to push information out to the public in a way that is lawful and proper. So let's look at what we do. First off, why do we release information? And and this is very important. You hear us at the very beginning of the show, we talk about the Pelian principles and the need to be transparent and open with the public. And to do that, we are doing it in an effort to build public trust. And so we want to do that to conduct those activities in an atmosphere of openness, so that there is no idea that we are not working with and for all of you. But what are we limited by? So we're limited by legal constraints, the need to preserve evidence, the need to prevent interference with criminal investigations, and to protect the constitutional and statutory rights of any person. Those middle ones, the preservation of evidence and to protect the criminal investigation, those are really the priority. They really are. What we don't want to do is I don't want to ever give out information because it is sensational or exciting, and I don't want to give it out if it's going to compromise the investigation, because now I have just failed at my number one job, which is to work for you and do a good job and hold people that do these crimes accountable. And I really want to make sure that I'm doing that right. So what you don't see is before we release those press releases is we will work as a team. Nicola, our public information officer, will come down and we will go over the press release, and then we'll present it to our detectives to make sure that the information that we're releasing isn't going to harm their investigation in any way. I really need them to be in the driver's seat, and I really need them to work hard. And what I am supposed to do as their manager is not put barriers in their way, but I'm supposed to remove them. But I do realize that I have an obligation at the same time, and that's the obligation to all of you, to make sure that I'm giving you accurate information that should you need to take some sort of action, you can. So let's look at what a press release or a social media post, what might it contain, and why might we put some of that information in there. So if we put a press release or a media release out, these are the 4 areas that we're typically looking at putting information out. And the first one is pretty apparent, and this is what I think most people gravitate to, and that's the facts of the event. And they're as we know them at the time of release, and that do not compromise the investigation. And we want to make sure that if we're not sure of a fact, we don't want to put it out. So we really want to make sure that if there's a video that has to be gone over, if there's something, we want it to be accurate. And I know we can all, if you do a quick Google search, you can go online and you can see where law enforcement agencies, or really any agency that has a public-facing component, has put out information in the past, and then the very next day they're like, that information we told you yesterday was absolutely wrong. So we do want to make sure that we put out very accurate information, and we do not want to put the wrong information out. And frankly, if we end up making that error, then we're going to correct it. The second area is going to be a public safety message. This is my promise to you. If there is a reason that we want you to avoid an area, shelter in place, if there's an action that you need to take, then we want to make sure that you're taking that action. And so to Todd's point earlier, maybe there's a way that we can if we put a little more information out, it will help you better prepare. So I'm actually going to, again, Todd, I'm going to take that advice, and we're going to sit down and discuss our crisis communication plan and see if there's maybe another way we can tweak that a little bit. But that's our public safety message, and we're going to put it out. So if it's the fire, it's going to be evacuate. If it's some sort of ongoing criminal activity, it's going to be avoid the area. If it's a traffic collision, we're going to say, avoid the area, what lanes are closed, and those sort of things. Our third area is going to be the call to action. And this is where It sometimes gets a little confusing with what we put out, but this call to action is where we will ask for your help to locate a car or a person, or take an action to secure yourself or your property, or evacuate. This is not a release of information of suspects' identities and names and things like that. And I'll get to that later, but it has to be seen as separate from that. This is a call to action. This is, we need your help. You've actually seen it on the show when we've had thefts and things like that, and maybe the person is wearing unique clothing, or we've exhausted means, and we want your help in identifying them. We may release a photo of the vehicle or the person that came into the store and committed the theft, and then we ask for your help in identifying those people. But if we have investigative steps that we're going to take first, we're probably not going to release that information if we were to have it. So we're gonna exhaust those investigative leads first. Next, if you can look, it'll be a policy statement, and this is, if it's necessary, we will talk about the applicable laws and policy that's being followed relevant to the incident. And now let's look what happens when someone is arrested. And this actually is right from the government code, and it's within the sheriff's policy that can be found at the link below. That's on our sheriff's website. That's our public policy. And so if someone is arrested, contemporaneous to that arrest, we will release the full name upon request. We will release the full name, the occupation, the physical description, date, time, and location of arrest, the factual circumstances surrounding the arrest, the time and the date of booking, the location the arrestee is being held, how much bail they have, any and all charges that they're being held on, and if they're released, the time and manner of the release. And that would be if the person was site released, and that's when you, like a traffic ticket, we give you a cite and you promise to appear later. If you're booked in jail, we would just say that that person, the arrestee, remains in custody there. So I wanted to go over this, and that was kind of a very quick what we release, why we release it, and the reasons why we would put out certain information. So I hope that clears up, why we would put out certain information and the need to protect evidence in the investigation and make sure that we are doing the best job that we can in service of the people that were victimized. If there's any questions, throw them in the chat. If it's something I can answer, I'll get to them during the show. I'm going to look over real quick and see if there's anything else. No. So let's move on. We've got a final thought. So the final thought is essentially, I'm pulling out some items from the council meeting last night. So last night at 5 o'clock, there was a council meeting, and I provided my quarterly update. I do an annual update every March, and then every 3 months after, for the following 3 quarters, I'll give a quarterly update, and I'll pluck some significant items or things that we're working on to present to the council so that they can present that information to all of you. So let's look at what I did. The first is I presented on our outreach, and then I presented on traffic safety, and I presented on our active threat training that we will be putting on. So in the way of outreach, if you look, we were very, very happy to do our recess with the cops. And if you can see, that's Lieutenant Jason Ingracia doing his wicked job of juggling. And he doesn't know just the traditional juggling. He actually knows quite a bit, so he amazes the kids. And then Officer Dockenbaugh is out there, and he was playing kickball and handing out stickers, and we were just having a good time. And what I remember from this is the kids were just happy to see us. The staff was great. But even our officers come back, and they're like, you know what? That is one of the best days I've had in a long time. Those kids are awesome. And it reminds me that all of these things we have going on in town, whether it's good parents, good schools, good neighbors, good businesses, they're all aimed at working towards building a good community, and the kids are a large part of that. So I'm very happy to see Recess with the Cops come back. There's another program that was actually formalized by one of our volunteers. So we used to, if someone requested, we would go out and we would go to a kid's birthday party and show the car off if we had time during that shift. If there was an event and you wanted an officer to come out, we would go out and give you an update. I would even go out to a lot of those. If there was like a homeowners association event, I would go out and provide a quick update on what's going on in town, answer any questions people have. And what our volunteer did, Jason Lukash, and he's a second generation VIP. His father, Ken, is here as well. But what he did was he formalized that process, and he calls it Cop Cars to the Community, and he formalized a longstanding program. And what he did was there's now signups online. And let me put this back up there. Look how excited these kids are. This is awesome. It allows you to sign up on the website, and if you give us a week or two notice, give us a window, because our priority is public safety. So if there's something priority that we have to handle, that's where we're going to be. But in our discretionary time, if we have a moment that we can outreach, build friendships, answer questions, we want to take those opportunities. And so you can sign up online, give us a week or two notice, and then we will go out and spend some time and provide an update on what it is we're doing to keep Danville safe. And it's not limited to just kids. I know parents tend to be the ones that make the most use of it, but we even celebrated a World War II veteran's birthday, and we're out for that. So with traffic safety, we did cover, and if you're a veteran to this show, you understand this. We covered the 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. On the engineering, I showed the sign, and that's the sign that's actually right over my shoulder. These are going to be replacing our trailers. And I know we've got some Camino Tasajara fans on here. The problem with a trailer, if we try to deploy that trailer out on Camino Tasajara, I either have to illegally park it in the bike lane, which we won't do, or I have to find someone's private property to put it on. What these speed signs allow us to do is strap them to an existing light pole and then leave them out there for a couple of weeks. And so we can move these around. So instead of the 2 trailers, we're going to end up with 4 of these, and we'll have them throughout town. The other thing that this will do is I know we get a lot of good feedback on the show. I get emails, and we get a lot of good feedback through council and town staff on when these speeders are occurring. But what these will do is these will actually record data for us as well. So it'll track the cars, so we can look and we can see when that trend is occurring. When is that car going 50 miles an hour on Communitas? When are they going 65 on Communitas? And if there's an area that we can refine and do that spot directed enforcement, that's going to help us get out there at the right time and make sure that we have the greatest impact. The middle one is the education, and that is our Start Smart and our every 15 minutes. And that's what you see right there. Every 15 minutes was at San Ramon Valley High this year, and that's Officer Barbero. And he's there performing for the crowd, being one of the actors. And then the right side, that is our enforcement. And that's what you expect the police department to do. You expect us to be out there enforcing. We realize that is probably the weakest of the 3. And I'll explain why. If we can design roads so that people will naturally drive the speed limit, stop at stop signs, stop lights, that is great, right? And we know that those have long-standing effects and usually require little enforcement. Education, and I know this doesn't seem like it works, but frankly, the fact that we have such a low collision rate, aside from last week, the reason we have such a low collision rate is because all of you in majority drive very, very safe. That's why that one car that's speeding down, or those 3 cars that are speeding down Camino Tas, or the one car that runs the stop sign, that's why they stand out, because it's not 15 cars back to back doing it. And we've all driven in other areas, and it's not like that everywhere. Can we tune it up? Can we be better? Certainly. And that's when the enforcement comes in, and that is geared towards changing behavior. And that is what that is designed to do. So we'll go out there and enforce, which means writing tickets, giving warning citations, or just giving verbal warnings and just explaining like why it is we're doing this. There's runners, there's cyclists, there's kids, there's dogs, other cars. We need to slow down in these areas. I also discussed what we do for traffic collision investigation. I'm actually going to truncate this with all of you because we did talk about it last week. If you want an in-depth, I would just refer you to last week's show. But I covered the 3 sections of a traffic collision investigation: the initial, the analysis, which is the longest part, and the conclusion. And the conclusion is if we end up finding that there is a cause for the collision that is criminal in nature, we forward it to the DA's office for review for prosecution. The middle part includes different types of analysis. We do, on large accidents, we'll actually have a mechanic come out and view the car, or an inspector rather. We download the car computers, we look at cell phones, and our traffic officers are trained to reconstruct a collision to determine how fast a car is going prior to or at the moment of collision and things like that. So they're very well trained in those areas. All right, let me see if there's any other questions in the chat. We're almost at the end here. So Linda is saying, will there be charges brought against the person who hit the young woman on Wood Ranch Road, Comunidad Sahara? And so this is where I will go back to the traffic collision investigation slide. The initial investigation was done on scene that day. That's where we went out and interviewed everybody, collected evidence. We're now in that middle section, so we are still waiting for lab results to come back, for some of the inspections and the analysis of all that data and the autopsy to be completed. And then we will move to the conclusion where an officer will determine what the cause of the collision is. And at that moment, if there is a cause to believe that the cause was criminal in nature, then we will forward it to the DA's Office of Prosecution, and that's a decision they make. And this is true in any investigation that we handle. Officers are here to determine the facts of what happened, and what we do is we present that case to the DA, and they're the ones that make a charging decision. So Chris Martin said, and you don't have to get DMV registration. So I'm not sure what that was in response to. I've been talking a little bit, so I may have missed what that was. When will the installed speeds, I'm sorry, a lot of words there, word salad. Gary says, when will they be installed? The speed signs. Two different types of speed signs. These are the temporary ones that we will put out in areas where we know we're having some problems. But Andy Dillard, our transportation manager, is the one that's been putting them up all through town. And if you notice, some new ones have come up in Comunidad Sahara area. And so we do have them coming up. There is a cycle, but I can't tell you when they're going to be on Comunidad. I don't have that schedule in front of me. All right. And then Julie, Adrian asked about the cyclists above. Would love to hear an answer about if bicycles are supposed to stop at stop signs and lights. Julie, thank you for pointing that out. I didn't see that above, and it always frustrates me a little bit when I'm trying to scroll through the thing and I miss some of the information. So in California, a bicycle is a vehicle, and if that vehicle is on the roadway, it has to obey all of the signs and lights and stop signs and all that as if it were a car. So the law doesn't see it as any different. So if they come up to a stop sign, they have to stop. If they come to a stoplight, they have to stop, wait for it to go green, and then go. If the light is malfunctioning, in other words, if the cyclist goes up to a stoplight and they sit there and they wait a reasonable amount of time, and I can't give you 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. I can't tell you what that time is. It depends on the intersection and what you observe as the cyclist. But if you wait a reasonable amount of time and you determine that it is not the signal or the device that detects the device that detects the bicycle isn't being triggered and it's not triggering the light, then you can proceed when safe. And that means that there's no cars, and that's when you can treat it as a stop sign. Other than that, we do not have what you have in some other states, which is a stop law that says a cyclist can treat a stop light like a stop sign and a stop sign like a yield sign. We don't have that here. So we do need them to stop. And I will say this, we've showed it on the show before with runners darting out on the Iron Horse Trail. We've shown it with a cyclist darting out from the Iron Horse Trail on Love Lane and getting hit by a car. In both cases, one, if the runner would have caused it, he would have been at fault. That cyclist was at fault for the collision, and sadly, he was also injured from the collision. And so we would say, really, really be careful. We can't stress that enough. And, Chris Martin, the trailers. You're right, we don't have to register a sign. I hear registering trailers and things like that can be pretty tricky. Well, that is all we have for the show. So I do want to remind you, help us out, Roadway Safety Plan. This is where you can provide your input on what we can do to better serve the community and make our roads safer. So please help us out there. And also, if you want to sign your neighborhood up, there's a link in the, there's an email in the description for Lindsay where you can register your community, and we will come out and we share this with our fire department friends, and they will come out as well. And that's National Night Out on August 2nd of this year, and we will be out there. So please come join us there. Oh, looks like we've got one more question. So Cynthia says, protect the area from violent crime. Put a patrol car on the freeway exits as a deterrent. That's a good suggestion. So we have some programs similar to that. We do have the camera system that is all over town, and what that does is that detects plates. It reads the plates, and if the plate is wanted for a crime, or if the car is stolen, or, and this is the big one, and I think this goes to what Cynthia is saying, if we have information that that car is suspected of doing crimes, then we will load it and we'll get alerted to that as well. So a lot of times, because we're in a great Bay Area where there's a lot of law enforcement information sharing, we'll get flyers, wanted posters, be on the lookout for this car that's committing this type of crime. Here's the license plate, and we'll put that license plate into the system. And so our officers will be alerted. So we'll actually then go to that area where that person is. As far as the deterrent, we do have a couple of layers to that. Sorry about that. So we do have we do have a couple layers to that. The first one is we have our volunteers, and what they'll do is they'll drive around town, and they'll fly the car, and they'll go in those areas where we know crime is committing. And then we also have cars that we leave throughout town in the areas where we know crime's committing. So I think that's going to be it for my update if this isn't getting fixed. So I'm going to work on some more tea here. Everyone, we're 10-10, but we're always 10-8 in service to you. Have a good night.